Welcome to episode number 134 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast. We're recording on October 17th, 2021. My name is Eric, host of the show, based in Southern Ontario, hunter, target shooter, ham radio operator, and computer geek. As a first responder, I witnessed an over-reliance on emergency services during major events, started a small preparedness company to help people get better prepared for at least 72 hours, if not longer, and do whatever it is they have to do with TP, apparently.
Going way off script already.
I'm just not reading what you put there, Ian.
Fair enough. My name is Ian. I live on Vancouver Island. I'm a student of preparedness, target shooter, and small-scale hobby farmer. Tonight, I am also the designated dumb question guy.
And that's what we appreciate about you, Ian.
Right.
I'm Alan. I'm a safety trainer, first responder, security expert, overall safety nerd.
I'm Gavin, a volunteer first responder, Carolina Reaper survivor, and instructor with Ragnarok Tactical.
I'm Scott, a first responder splitting my time between Southern and Northern Ontario. I like learning things, and I don't accept that things will always carry on the way they have, just because it would be convenient for us.
I'm Jeff. I'm based in Central Ontario. I'm a target shooter, still waiting for the ham radio quiz person to set my date so I can take my test.
General Come the excuses.
Yeah, Wednesday's supposed to be the day. He said that last week, so we'll see.
A lot of Wednesdays have come and gone, Jeff. It's always Wednesday.
Yeah, well, in my case, every day's a Wednesday.
Oh, yeah.
Or a Saturday, or a Sunday.
Yeah, says the retired guy.
Must be nice. I'm Brad. I'm from Eastern Ontario. I've been in preparedness in some way, shape, or form since the ice storm of '98, and I'm constantly trying to better myself.
Want to help support the show and keep the Canadian Prepper Podcast on the air? Buy some swag. We have both the Canadian Prepper Podcast t-shirt and the tactical Velcro patch at www.prepperpodcast.ca. All proceeds help keep the lights on and the wood gasifier fueled.
I don't know if you saw that article about the wood gasifier. We'll get back to that, but it was a cool one today. If you're enjoying the show, please take a few minutes to like us on Facebook and submit a review on iTunes. Also, we want your feedback, good or bad, or if there's just a topic you want us to cover. You can email us at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. Also, check out our new Discord server. The link is in the show notes and in the live chat.
And apparently I'm not allowed to post at the Facebook live chat. That's getting rejected.
Okie dokie.
Have you given your donations to the Zuckerberg? Because maybe that's the problem.
I think we're probably going to get zucked.
I don't know.
Finally.
It happens. Yeah, it happens to the best of us.
And us too, apparently.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
One
So we've
more
got
on the
some coagulated content for you in this episode. We're going to start off with some preparedness-related news articles. Next, we'll let you know what we've done for our preparedness since the last episode. Then we're going to get into the main topic of advanced first aid. Let's move into the news.
Not a whole lot of terribly interesting things for me this week. Some of you may remember author Gary Paulsen. He wrote a couple of novels, one being The Hatchet, the sequel to that being The River. They were about a young kid who was involved in a plane crash and managed to survive in the boreal forest in northern Ontario for several months. And he died. Anyways, so that was kind of sad. I have very specific memories of reading those books while I was unable to participate in things when I was a kid. I was laid up in a cast and couldn't play. So, yeah, there we go. That was some sad news, but it was, as all things happen, I guess he was 80, 81 or 82 or something. So it was a reasonable time for him to go.
He's Canadian as well, I'm assuming?
I believe he was.
Oh, cool. All right, I got an article here from the CBC bragging about how the Saskatchewan's got their program up and running to hire ex-police officers to enforce COVID rules, including sending people that don't cooperate to a secure isolation site. And they also introduced a snitch line in Saskatchewan that if you feel somebody's not, adhering to COVID isolation or spread protocols, I guess, you can, call in, get a reward for snitching on them.
What could possibly go wrong? Said the thought.
Yeah, jackbooted thugs, snitch lines, and COVID camps. Oh my. Anyway, supply chain issues. Lee Valley Tools did an article in the CBC as well saying they are looking at a 1-year backlog for any items that you may order. They actually sent out their Christmas catalog early with only items they have in stock. And they said you order anything else, you're looking at a 1-year wait minimum.
Wow.
So they might have,
Fantastic.
at this point, why they just say we don't have it or we're not going to have it? Because I mean, it's
Yeah.
silly.
You're
Okay,
ordering for not this Christmas, next Christmas is what
Yeah.
they're saying.
What I find
Yeah,
really
it's-
entertaining is driving past car lots, right? Car dealers, where the lots are absolutely empty, but they've still got signs that are like, "Come on in and design your perfect car," because you have to order it, and you're probably going to be waiting 6 to 8 months. So you might as well get the exact one that you want.
Kind of reminds me of the Soviet
yeah,
Russia thing
it's,
where you could order your Lada and 10 years down the road it would show up.
Well, I bet somebody, I believe it was on the Discord there, somebody tagged a video that somebody took of one of the ports down. I believe it was Long Beach or something. And it was empty. No boats at the port, no workers there, nothing.
I
Yeah,
saw
no,
that
Complaining
earlier.
about-
If it was really a thing, they would put the National Guard to work at the docks, really. If they really needed laborers, whatever. But they're still taking Sundays off. They're still working, like, I think maybe 15, 16-hour days, so 2 shifts, that's it. They're not working 24/7, so it's a manufactured crisis at best. But anyway,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah, but
Well,
the union won't
but
let
if-
them work any longer.
Well, that's
Biden
it.
the other day said they were going to work nights or weekends or something, and somebody asked him, "Well, where are you going to get the workers from? You already don't have enough workers. Are they going to be robots? Like, where are you going to get the extra staff to do the work?"
From the gulags in Saskatchewan once they're filled up.
clearly,
That's
free labor, that's how it works.
yeah.
It's actually kind of funny because I ordered a bunch of stuff from Cabela's too for reloading, and sure enough, I had my package show up and said, "Hey, your package is here. Come on down." So I get down there, exactly 1/4 of what I ordered was in there, and they're like, "The rest is just back ordered." I'm like, "Well, you could have told me that when I ordered because I wouldn't have ordered it from you then." But now it's just sitting in limbo for the next X number of weeks.
Of course.
Months.
Yeah. Anyway,
It's
that's
the
all I
worst
had.
timeline. It's like
It
seriously.
really is.
So I've got one sort of related to COVID and also just on our topic tonight of first aid, and that is Quebec nurses refused mandatory overtime this weekend. Again, an article from CBC, I know, of all places, but that the Quebec nurses refused mandatory overtime just for this weekend. But funny enough, they gave the government a deadline of November 15th to figure it out, or they were going to end it for good. The funny part of that is November 15th is also the date that the government extended the vaccine mandate until, and said November 15th, if you're not vaccinated, you're out. So I don't know how the government is going to kick out thousands of healthcare workers and at the same time have the union say we are not going to work any more mandatory overtime. So one of them is going to have to flinch. They've backed the government into the corner, and we'll just have to see which one, like I say, which one flinches first.
Well, if they've got
Hopefully the
enough,
government.
if they've got enough extra workers that they can afford to like punt a bunch of them out the door, then the mandatory overtime shouldn't be a thing. Then they shouldn't need to. 'Cause
Yeah.
they must be fully staffed, right?
Stop trying to apply logic to the government. It has never worked in history.
Yeah.
Historically, it's never been a thing.
So
And
I'm
then,
sure
of course,
everyone.
just on
Go ahead,
the other part of it, I've got another one from Global News, and it's a bit of an older article, but just kind of along the COVID line and other lines, is it just talks about how much money big pharma pays to doctors and hospitals in Canada, and it was $151 million in 2018 or 2019. Sorry, was the last update on that. So, but unlike other countries, they only have to report how much money they gave. They don't have to report who they gave it to, why they gave it to them. So, like everything
wait,
else, follow the money.
Are we hearing that there's less than positive accountability between a giant corporation
Alan, stop
and the
using logic.
government? I just want to make sure that I understand
Shocking.
this, because I've never heard of this before, and I want to
Yeah.
make sure that I understand completely. So what you're saying is that the government doesn't really want us to know where all this money comes from or where it goes.
Yeah.
And we don't consider it a conflict of interest that all of this unaccountable money is just being given to people who then do things that benefit that company that gave them the money.
Yeah, no, that sounds totally normal and legit.
You know,
well,
somebody-
I'll
somebody
read directly from the article. It says about the 10 largest pharmaceutical companies in Canada gave more than 151 million to doctors and hospitals over the last 2 years. So sorry, maybe it was over 2 years. And then the next paragraph says, but unlike the US and many European countries, Canada has no legislation compelling drug companies to reveal which healthcare provider got money or what it was for.
In a country where we have a ton of regulation, you think that that would be one that's on the books?
You know, somebody
Yeah,
should
You
start a
would think that
podcast.
would make- But again, that makes sense.
To bark about this, about inefficiency of government, and how much they waste money.
I think I know some guys.
So I'm sure everyone's heard about Iqaluit's contaminated water supply. It was big enough news that I think it was kind of the lead story on most media. The water supply in the capital of Nunavut was contaminated by hydrocarbons. People noticed their tap water started smelling like diesel. There was a do not drink order issued, and children and pregnant women weren't even supposed to bathe in the water. There was a whole series of flights in with tens of thousands of liters of bottled water. People were getting it from like the distribution trucks or just taking it out of the local river. But as the area has very limited resources, things like water carriers, buckets, whatever, were all sold out. Situation sounds like it's under control. They've identified the holding tank that was contaminated, but they're not sure if it came from melting permafrost, freeing some old diesel spill, or melting permafrost heaving some infrastructure, causing damage to pipes. Regardless, I'd be much happier up there having a camping water filter and some water carrying capacity of my own.
And
Problem
you
is
can
the
get
rivers
that-
are moving really slow this time of year. They've already started to kind of stop.
You can get such filters at rapidsurvival.com.
Not ones that filter
Also,
like diesel and stuff.
the
Not chemicals.
The good news is that if you can smell the diesel fuel in your water, you probably don't have COVID.
That is
Well,
true.
Into everything, right?
So
Same
I'm
thing if you
gonna
taste
suggest-
it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to
True.
say then that some of the politicians up there maybe have COVID, because apparently the locals are saying they smelt it for several days before the government acknowledged that, yeah, we might have a problem. So
Well, I mean, it sounds to me like this is a problem they've been promising to fix for a long time.
I think it was even an election promise in 2016, was it not?
I think it was even an election promise not that long ago.
Yeah.
And possibly even before that as well.
I mean, if he doesn't fix the water problem, how is he going to go surfing?
Well, if Long Beach and Tofino was filled with diesel fuel, you know damn well it'd be fixed overnight. But
Yeah. Should we move into what we've done lately for preps? We'll save this for the other CPP.
We'll save this for Monday night. So I've been getting the garage ready for winter. Looking forward to it hosting our vehicles so we don't have to be brushing stuff off. I also got a nice pocket bellows. It's a little telescoping metal device. Looks like an old school car radio antenna, so that you can blow right into part of the fire and get that going. So it's a handy little thing. Quite excited about that.
is that homemade or is that like store bought?
Just store-bought. Basically, it's turns into a 19-inch long stainless steel straw that you can kind of not stick your face right in the fire, but get some oxygen where it needs to be.
Just don't accidentally breathe in right before you go to blow through it, though, right?
You raise a good point.
That's what I think
Kyle,
we
if you're
do,
listening,
Scott.
get your pencil ready. Here it
Yeah.
comes. No mention. All right. No
what, that
static
he
valve.
might use it for his wood gasifier?
Nope, didn't do it. I didn't say it.
No.
They're-
We're good.
If fires give off, a certain
Oh, that
chemical
too.
compound that some people
Yeah.
like to mention, but
Oh boy. Hey, Brad. You're muted.
Yep, sorry. Changed my wife's back brakes today. Friday night we noticed a whole lot of scraping noise in her back brakes. And I normally don't do brakes at all, and this was the first time I've done anything to deal with brakes solo. And lo and behold, when I put everything back together, she drove around the block and she actually stopped. So I was quite happy. I did
Was
some
that
more
the desired
cleaning.
intent?
That was the desired intent.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
I want to keep her around.
I was going to say, I noticed you made her test it, not you.
Well, I mean, he does have insurance, so
Yes.
just in case.
Absolutely. I did a whole lot more cleaning up in my yard, and I cleaned up in my shed, getting ready for those winter projects we were talking about earlier. Make sure I had room to be able to walk around and find everything I needed to do, and had a horrible yesterday with all that rain that came down. That put a damper on a bunch of stuff. So, that's about all I did.
So I ended up, I guess it is for preps because water is kind of important. So I ended up having a leak in my water system at my house. I got up one morning and there was water in a place that it should not have been. So I ended up with a leak in my expansion tank. So only a couple minor hiccups, an extra run to Home Depot because I bought the wrong size piece that I needed to install. But outside of that, I am not complaining for my first attempt at a major plumbing issue. I did have somebody come over and kind of look over my shoulder to make sure that I wasn't really doing anything I shouldn't be doing. And I'm actually pretty happy how it worked out. I picked up a gently used tank and an almost brand new pump for about half the price of a brand new one. So
Nice.
Good job.
It's not officially a project unless you have to make multiple runs at Home Depot anyways. So
yeah.
Right, for myself, and I don't think this counts for the stats either, Kyle, but I installed all new carbon monoxide and smoke detectors throughout the house. So it's time to replace them. And as I've mentioned, the last couple episodes, we're in the midst of renovations. So took them all down, put new ones up. And thanks to Alan for helping me place one of them, because I wasn't quite sure where the best location would be for it. So they're all up and operational now. Yeah,
Everywhere is the right question, is the right answer.
There you go. Does that count for a stat? Maybe.
Yeah. No, he's
slightly
reinforcing
baited.
it.
Yeah, slightly baited, but we'll give it a half stat. And then just before the show here, found and fixed a small short in the electrical system in the garage. So prevented having to use said smoke detectors for a while.
What was it popping a breaker? What was going on?
No, the lights in the garage were just randomly flickering, like they would work for a day or so and then not. And then I actually ran out to the beer fridge to grab a beer before showtime here and noticed the fridge wasn't running. So jiggled the cord there and heard some crackling in behind the electrical outlet. I was like, huh, that's not good. And then the lights in the garage started flickering on and off again. I'm like, uh-oh. So that's killed the breaker. Ran out, and the one of the wires actually in the back of the electrical socket had worked its way out, and whoever put that outlet in to begin with stripped off way too much off of the wire, so it was touching the inside of the junction box, and all kinds of nastiness could have happened there. So pull it all apart, new outlet in, and everything's happy.
Huh. Cool.
Yeah, joys of home ownership.
It's good to be able to fix your own stuff.
It's nice. Yeah, it took about 10 minutes. It was great.
Speaking of home ownership, so on top of coupled with my massive amount of absenteeism from here, I had bad internet when I went on the last episode, but got the local internet guy to show up, and sure enough, we discovered what the issue was. I had a 30 decibel loss going on the signal from the road to the router, basically. Turns out somewhere in the middle of one of the walls, the previous owner had put a 3-way cable splitter, and that said cable splitter had developed a short. And so I was basically getting like no internet signal to the router. That was a problem. So
slight problem, yeah.
Yeah, so not so much for preps per se, but hey, we get to talk about preps thanks to my better internet. That's something.
Well, I mean, and now you can also download all of your extracurricular activities at a much better rate to stockpile them for later.
Well, like the field manuals and everything else.
Yeah.
Yes,
Gotcha.
it must. That's the only possibility.
Only one.
Clearly.
Seriously.
Clearly.
Yeah. Well, and cat videos to laugh at.
Well, yeah. You need entertainment.
Just about to say that. You need entertainment.
I'm not an animal. Yeah, come on. So I started my reloading process for the winter, and I'm gonna give myself a pat in the back for having a hoarding level of powder in the closet. So when my 3 cans of powder didn't show up there, I didn't have to stop. So I just carried on, did my thing, and I'll just have to wait for the said ordered powder to show up whenever they show up. So that's good. Got some of that done. Minor repairs to the golf clubs that had to be done because I had a rainy day outside, couldn't do much outside, so I thought I'd just go to the shop and work on some of those. CGN deals, of course. Went to the local feed store today and picked up, well, a schwack of chicken feed and alpaca feed and everything else, to the point where one of the other customers was mentioning me stocking up or hoarding or something. And I was like, no, I only come here, a couple times a year, no big deal, whatever. But none of their business.
Did you tell them that you have a
you're
podcast where you talk exclusively about hoarding materials?
Pretty much, yeah. No,
You're gonna get real life zucked after that one.
Yeah, pretty much.
But,
I've already been sucked. It's good. You should try it sometime.
yeah, it's good for the soul.
That's right. So, of course, once I get all that feed home, I had to rotate it. So, of course, I got stuff in certain storage areas. I had to use the oldest stuff first. So, I went and filled up the coops, rotated it all around. That was probably a 2-hour job. Started a little bit of gas rotation still just to keep up and make sure it's like as new as possible. Picked up some 22 ammo because finally the Cabela's had some in. It wasn't the world's best, but it was at least there, which is a good thing. Picked up some more canned goods, mainly dog food at the dollar store, because believe it or not, if it's marked dog food, it's a different set of rules than if it's human food. So we got some human food for the dogs, and it's super cheap. And I was watching a Wrangler Star video, and according to him, down the States, the cost at like places like Home Depot and everything else for these plastic HDPE2 buckets, whatever, has gone up through the roof. And so I went over to the Home Depot there and picked up a bunch of buckets today, and I needed some anyway, so that was good. Because buckets on a farm.
Make sure you go to check out Firehouse Subs. You've probably got one in Victoria, or if you're across in Vancouver, they sell their pickle buckets for like $3.
Never seen one yet.
And the subs are delicious.
Yeah, never
They
seen a
are
Firehouse.
delicious.
Yeah,
Never seen a Firehouse Subs in my life.
They
got
bought
one in
us.
town.
They bought us a command trailer for my search and rescue group.
Oh, they're fantastic.
Yeah.
Nothing but great things to say, and the food is fantastic. Like,
Yeah, and they have little fire hats you can wear in the restaurant.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Nice.
Well, that solves it right there. That
Yeah, it
clinches
certainly
it.
does.
Bring it home, put it on for the wife.
Yeah, a little role playing, nothing wrong with that.
Oh, if we weren't getting kicked off of YouTube and Facebook, we might now.
He's gonna make a calendar out of it. It's okay.
It's okay. Yeah, it's just for the public.
Oh, boy.
And that just gathered the last bits for my homemade solar power boxes, and I think I'm all ready to start construction on the last one, and that's pretty much it.
I now have to drink to get rid of that image out of my head. I have to drink a lot. My entire focus this week has been on PT and doing course prep. I've got an NFPA certification test coming up this weekend, so I've done nothing else. I did, however, get my new survival medicine handbook by former Prepper Podcast guest Dr. Joe Alton. The new 4th edition is large and in charge. It's fantastic. I can't wait to get into it and dig into some of the things. I've got the 2nd edition as well, so I'm excited to see what he's updated, and we'll talk about that more on another episode, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I ordered mine today. It's coming tomorrow.
Yeah, he's coming on next week to chat with us, so that'll be good.
Oh, I thought we were going to make that a surprise.
No, we'll mention it now
All right.
because we're going to be giving away a copy of his book as well in the Discord server, so check it out.
There we go. So we're going to be talking about this more next week when Dr. Joe Walton comes on the episode on the podcast again. I think this is his 3rd visit to us, and and then we'll give away one of these books. So it's it's fantastic. It's exciting. I can't wait to dive into it, and I can't wait to talk to Dr. Altman about it next weekend.
It's going to be good. All right, we're doing the wide area mag this week, Scott.
Absolutely. We all love learning things. That's kind of why we're here. While there's some very intelligent people around here, present company excluded, there's lots of smart people out there with skills and talents that we want to learn from. So we want to hear from you at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. I've been thinking about building some resiliency in vehicles. And while I'd love to buy a carbureted pickup truck from the 70s, where you can actually fix stuff, it'd probably be way more practical and space efficient to buy a replacement computer module for my current vehicle and just store it safely. So my question to our wider audience, how many of the little other computer units do you have to have in backup so that the main computer control would agree to work? I would hate to spend the money on the main computer for my vehicle and then sort of have one of the simple little peripheral units scuttle my whole plan. So someone out there knows about this stuff. Please let us know. Feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. Don't be intimidated. You don't have to be an expert on the air. Just tell us some things, even off air. If you have a great website or resource, just let us know. We're all here to learn stuff from like-minded people, so please share.
Awesome. And before we get into the main topic, Denny has got a good point. We could make a new CPP calendar with that whole Firehouse Subs hat thing. Just so everybody keeps that visual in their mind.
I'm gonna order the Dalmatian suspenders today.
I'm gonna wear the CPP hat. I'm gonna wear the hat and nothing else, and just like a little patch, a little CPP patch.
I'd pay $1 for that calendar.
Oh, here we go.
I'm really hoping there's supply chain issues with the Dalmatian suspenders.
Yeah, there's probably going to be some major supply chain issues for the calendar as a whole. Yeah. All right, let's move into the main topic, shall we?
So I guess first thing, our usual disclaimer. This does not take the place of professional training. This is general information. It's some good things, a lot of experience-based advice, but not a substitute for actual training. And please get this validated by somebody who knows more than I do before you go off and do it.
And certainly by someone that knows more than Ian does.
Well, that's all of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
Based on the questions he asked.
Yeah.
So the topic we're going to talk about advanced first aid. So in general, in Ontario, there are a few levels of first aid that are beyond the emergency or standard that kind of deal with basics in an urban setting. So for those of you who are outside of Ontario, I can't comment on what those levels are. I know Alberta has like 1, 2, 3. I think BC has like a personal level and a couple of workplace levels. I forget the exact terminology. So I'm not going to pretend that this is universal. This is an Ontario. This section is Ontario standards, but you've got the 1 day, here's what CPR and choking is, and put a hand over bleeding, and that's it. And the 2 day that goes into a little bit more. That's those are your basic and advanced first aid. Above that, there are a few other levels out there. So probably two of the more common ones from the Red Cross are either wilderness first aid, which intends that help is coming, but you're 50 kilometers or more from advanced care. And then the Red Cross also has a professional responder, which is 2 levels: the first responder and emergency medical responder, or EMR. Those are like 40 and 80 hours respectively, that are a little bit more intense, get into a few more skills. A lot of that stuff is based on being in a team setting, so it's kind of geared towards firefighters, industrial responders, things like that. I know that there are a few places, Saskatchewan being one of them and Alberta being another, where they'll actually pair an EMR with a paramedic and do the driving. That's how most of the United States works. They have a different classification. They call it an EMT, or an emergency medical technician, and they'll put an EMT with a paramedic, and the EMT does the stepping and fetching and gets the tools and does the driving, while the paramedic does the medical intervention. So whether that ever comes to Ontario or not up for debate at this point. Not my problem. And then St. John Ambulance has one kind of advanced level called MFR, Medical First Responder, which is approximately 40 hours, approximately equivalent to the Red Cross's first responder level. There's also a Marine level that focuses a little bit more on kind of ongoing care. All of those things are, again, kind of intended for, you have a lot of gear available, you have a team available, and you are advancing the goal of getting that person to a hospital. That is a lot different from, you are off grid out in the middle of nowhere, there is no hospital. That's next week's episode. This week is what we can do now while we're waiting for an ambulance or waiting for extrication, whether that's a SAR team or a helicopter or whatever that's going to take you from where you are to where you're going. one of Ian's questions, and I hope he was joking about this, was about using tampons. There's a thing that's been going around for a really long time, and I kind of want it to die off, but I also really enjoy getting into these debates and watching some of frankly, the bullshit that goes on along with it. Tampons are not good for bullet holes. Period. Like, absolutely not. Under absolutely no circumstances is a tampon useful for that. Gavin could get far more into the ballistics than I can, but the entry wound will probably, the entry wound's kind of the size of your thumb, but once it gets into your body, it expands rather drastically and creates a much larger hole than the entry wound. So while you may be plugging the entry wound, you are not actually plugging the source of the bleeding and not actually stabilizing anything. So just don't do it. Go take a proper stop the bleed class. You can contact me or Gavin off air. We're both instructors. We'd both be happy to set one up in Southern Ontario for you. Tampons are
Northern
good.
Ontario have gauze. We'll travel, right?
Yeah. I guess it's really not. Yeah, it's really not that big a deal to go driving. It's not a lot of props.
Sort of have an online thing now. You could do the theory portion online now. Yeah. You still have to, still actually pack a wound. But yeah, no.
Yes.
Don't use tampons.
So what I'm getting at was triggering achieved.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, no,
100% without question.
Yeah, don't do it, because like I've done, like, not on a person because I'm not stupid, but like just to see. The biggest problem with tampons, because it looks like it's going to work really well, right? Because it's like a little cylindrical thing. You just stick it in there, pull the applicator out, boom, bullet hole plug. There's not enough material is the biggest problem with it. So I have the little wound cubes that I use for practicing and teaching stop the bleed on. And like you jam almost like an entire roll of gauze that's like 10 feet long in that thing. One singular tampon has nowhere near the material density that 10-foot roll of gauze does. You'd need like 8 or 9 tampons, because I tried it just to see like how many of these can I pack in here to get roughly the same, consistency as the gauze. Yeah, so you'd be using like the whole friggin' box. For the same money, you can buy a whole box of gauze that would pack, 10, 15 wounds, or wrap 10 or 15 burns, or all kinds of other stuff. Yeah, don't use tampons unless they're for nosebleeds or what they're actually
nosebleeds. It's great for nosebleeds. Perfect for that.
Yeah. Do you have any idea how hard it was to find a picture on the internet of somebody using a tampon for a wound? So I sent that one to you. That's all I could do.
Okay, can we? I'd like to introduce a motion that we refire Ian.
Oh, we talked into that.
All right. See you later.
Oh boy, this is such a huge topic. You know what, Scott? You've got like 35 paragraphs in here. Why don't you start on that?
So I was chewing on thing about the curriculum for advanced first aid, and then I looking at the definitions that you put above, and then it occurred to me that this podcast is all about people who are looking to be more self-sufficient, self-reliant, in the event that normal isn't a thing anymore. So that being said, the more knowledge we all have, the better, even if it's things we can't or shouldn't do or use, while better options of ambulances or hospitals are available. So good advanced first aid starts with good standard first aid. So starting with basic anatomy, standard first aid, then moving to advanced first aid is just the natural progression of that learning process. I love the marine first aid approach, which is very applicable in our SHTF scenarios where we'd all be in little boats away from help. Keeping infections to a minimum and preventing little problems from becoming big ones. Again, that's a lot of the stuff we'll talk about next week. Regardless of all this, training and knowledge can be very helpful in our normal lives, especially when most of us are interested in pursuing outdoor activities. So I thought I'd pick a few high points. Tourniquets. The general consensus is that improvised ones don't do the job of a purpose-built one. They have to go on uncomfortably tight. One of the best training courses I've ever done was a precursor to the Stop the Bleed courses that are currently available, as these guys are saying. The instructors had spray bottles full of fake blood and would keep soaking the area until you had that tourniquet absolutely cranked. You ease the pressure off upstream from that blood vessel where the wound is. So typically you're like kneeling on the patient's groin while you're cranking the tourniquet on. As soon as you sort of
that's also been found to be largely ineffective.
Well,
don't delay the other steps in order to get that pressure on there in the first place.
Oh, absolutely. It's just kind of something to do while you're doing the useful parts.
Yeah.
And just cranking it. We all have the habit of tensing our muscles as that tourniquet is applied. So when we relax afterwards, we inadvertently loosen the tourniquet, hence the need for that second bit of tightening. Leave it on, leave it tight. It has to be uncomfortable. Don't loosen it to check anything. There's no sense in knocking loose the blood clot that the body's been working on at the site of the injury below that tourniquet and making the body start the process over with less blood.
That's the part that frustrates me the most about all of this whole tourniquet stuff. And I get, like, as we progress, we understand more and everything, but hearing, supposed medical professionals that have more pieces of paper and more expensive pieces of paper than I do talk about, like, oh, you need to let that off every hour and you need to do this and no, you just crank that thing on as tight as you can and you leave it. You do not touch that until somebody that actually has that piece of paper shows up and will do it, because then it's their responsibility and not yours anymore. And I'd rather be alive and having nerve damage or missing a leg than dead any day. That's for sure.
And the big thing is like what happens after you apply the tourniquet, and the reality is that person, if they've got that level of hemorrhaging where you think it's necessary, they need to be going to the hospital right away, because the only way to solve that problem is to reattach the things that have been severed to cause the bleeding. The basics of life: air goes in and out, blood goes round and round, and any deviation is bad. Yeah. If blood is not going round and round because we've cut that off or we've cut it open, that needs to be healed and sewn shut before the tourniquet can be removed, right? Or you have to have another plan in place. So you're putting that on with the full intent that it's going to be uncomfortable, it's going to suck, but it buys the medical team time to repair that artery, to repair the wound, and then that person stops losing their blood.
And I think this is one of the biggest problems with standard first aid is they kind of neglect to explain to you that what you're doing, and this is mostly in CPR, because for bleeding they're like, just apply pressure, which is not going to work, but like you're prolonging the window of that person surviving so that actual medical people can show up with the tools and the knowledge to actually do something that is going to save that person's life. You're just making that window of time longer.
Absolutely.
With CPR, like very, very few people have actually been brought back to life by you pounding on their chest.
It's you're advancing the clock for them. You're pausing the death clock. And the exact same thing goes with trauma.
Same with bleeding. And this is, when you do your standard first aid, they do the ABCs, right? So airway, breathing, circulation. So C being circulation is the bleeding part of it. When you go to more advanced levels of first aid, you start leaving the whole ABC thing behind and go with March or some other ones where the M is massive hemorrhage or massive bleed. You deal with that first, because you will bleed out and die and not be able to be brought back to life a lot faster than you will die from not having oxygen. So if you don't stop that bleeding thing immediately, the other things don't matter.
Well, and what we tend to get lost in is, if I do my airway, then breathing, then circulation, if I give that person 2 breaths because they're not breathing, my natural inclination, if I've done CPR training over the years, my natural inclination is then I get on the chest and start doing compressions.
And you might just be pumping more blood,
which is completely useless if you're just pumping blood out onto the ground. Eventually you run out of blood to pump. and you
Yeah.
haven't solved anything. You've made the problem. You've sped up the problem instead of speeding up the solution.
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure I saw it in movie Wides where the guy like slammed his fist on the chest and said, "Come on, don't die." I mean, everything was reset. It was perfect, right?
So the precordial
that's how
thumb,
it works.
it is a thing. It was actually taught in standard first aid up until the early 90s. I remember.
They also
learning that.
encourage people to smoke to have smaller babies and to drink while pregnant because it's good for you. And
Yeah.
and if you happen to get the right arrhythmia and you hit them hard enough at the right time, you can theoretically pause the heart long enough to let it reset, which is exactly what a defibrillator does, just on a much larger and more predictable scale.
just like smacking a baby on the ass when it's born, right? It just
Absolutely.
jumpstarts everything.
Or hanging a baby upside down and smacking him in the ass when he's choking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a time when it might work.
Yes. There's a time where if I flap my arms hard enough, I'm going to fall slower too. But that doesn't necessarily mean I should be relying on it.
That's what umbrellas are for. Duh.
Yes, exactly. So one of the things that Scott wrote in here is that we write TK and the time on the patient's forehead. So every year we do first aid and BLS and stop the bleed with the department here, and we have we have an instructor that comes out, and this particular instructor is a medic with the local ambulance service who regularly takes our trauma patients to the local trauma center. And what I've heard is that allegedly the trauma team absolutely hates it when you do that. I don't know why they have such a hard-on for it, but the trauma team at our local hospital apparently just despises when you do that, which just makes me.
Where would they prefer you write it then? On the testicles or something?
Well, they would prefer that you write the time right next to the tourniquet.
But
most commercial tourniquets actually have a spot to write the time on.
Yeah, so
exactly. There you go.
So here's the problem with this nice white shiny thing.
You mean this thing that you're putting right next to where all the blood's gushing out of?
And your hands are covered in blood while you're doing that. So, like even the like so that model that
and the skin in the area that they're telling you to write on is also all covered in blood and everything.
Yeah, of course. So that particular model, that's called a CAT tourniquet or a combat application. The video, like the instructional video from the manufacturer for that, even they get blood all over that time strip.
Oh yeah, and the one on the soft T is even worse. This is a canine soft T, but it's the same. So like it's just like a little off-white thing on the piece of a flap somewhere that's like, this is gonna get even more covered in blood.
Yeah.
It's not gonna work. Even with the best pens in the world, Sharpies, it's not gonna work.
You're still writing on the forehead.
Yeah.
I found it really interesting that like every year this particular medic comes out and this particular medic says like, don't ever do this. They absolutely hate it, which just makes me want to do it so much more. And like I'm gonna just start doing it. I'm gonna write the time on the forehead when there's not even a tourniquet, like just for like. So we the only time that I've ever actually applied a tourniquet in the field, that's exactly what we did. And it was actually the medic, like one of the responding medics that asked like that did that. And then the orange copter came in and said, "What the hell is this?" And then we said, "Well, we didn't have anywhere else to put it because the person was in really rough shape." And he said, "Well, I suppose that makes sense. If they don't have a forehead, there's probably no point in doing any of this. So here we go."
Yeah. If they don't have a forehead, you probably
don't. You can probably save your tourniquets for the next time.
Yeah. Maybe go and retake the first aid classes again because you've missed something.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk needle decompression there. Scott.
Chest needles are so much fun. If you've seen the movie Three Kings with George Clooney, there's a great example there. Lungs are this spongy consistency. They're only connected and opening is to the windpipe, the trachea. And they're actually held to the inside of the chest wall by suction. So if you damage the lungs and air is escaping from the inside of the lungs into that space between the lung and the chest wall, the suction decreases, and then the lung collapses under its own elastic force. We call this a tension pneumothorax, and it really, really needs medical attention. So putting a chest needle in helps remove some of that escaped air from that pleural space, the space between the outside of the lung and inside of the chest wall, so that that patient's still going to end up needing a chest tube in serious cases. It can happen by injury, particularly pressure-related injuries like scuba diving. If you hold your breath on the way up and that air expands and you injure the lung from the inside. It can happen from localized trauma, or it can actually happen spontaneously, particularly in very tall, thin people. They're just more subject to it. Here we're getting
another
into
reason why being a fat guy is good.
There you go.
Harder to kidnap, harder to stab, less prone to spontaneous tension pneumothorax.
Drought and famine resistant.
Serious question. I actually swear to God I won't troll you this time.
Sure.
Tension pneumothorax. Is it excess pressure or lack of pressure in the plenum or
Pleural space?
Pleural space. Thank you.
It's a little bit of each. You get air moving from the lungs into this sort of hypothetical space that's supposed to basically just be vacuum. So you end up building pressure, and then the elastic lungs start collapsing. So you have all this air inside your chest, but it's not inside the lungs where the gas exchange is supposed to happen. So as a result, it kind of collapses the lungs. It can push things over to one side. And it's a major, major problem that will, depending how bad it is, it can kill people pretty quickly. It's a really invasive medical procedure, but the reason I brought it up is just understanding it is kind of useful in this context. So,
quite frankly, I was too distracted by Marky Mark's bad acting than to actually worry about the science behind it. So.
That was an excellent movie. Do not badmouth it. But yeah, yeah. I mean, it is a little invasive. You are sticking a needle into the chest through the chest wall and letting some air out. But yeah, I mean, it looks, for those of the viewing audience, I've got one in my hand right here. It's a little. I'm not going to pull the thing out because this is sterilized and part of my kit. But yeah,
So it's essentially a 14 gauge needle that basically creates another outlet for the air that gets into the space where it's not supposed to be, and so it's a bit of a vent. And those ones, yours, that has a one-way valve on it, right?
I believe this does, yeah.
So some of them do, some of them don't. Yeah. Same with chest seals. Some of them have a vent, some of them don't.
Well, and this is where you start seeing people when you do like the chest seal and you've done your standard first aid and they stick the piece of plastic or credit card and tape it on 3 sides, and then you need to burp it and do all of that stuff. It's the same kind of thing.
And that's actually not even taught at standard first aid anymore. That's up to wilderness and above now. Because apparently that's
when I did it, wilderness was way lower than standard.
It's been a while since
because when I did wilderness first aid, it was like an 8-hour class, and like standard first aid is now like a 16. Day and a half.
Yeah,
it's 16 or something like that. Yeah.
Well, it's 14 hours of teaching time if you do it the Red Cross way.
Yeah.
So take that however you like. But yes, that's one of those. Again, that's one of those life-saving skills, especially if care is going to be delayed. That needle decompression is absolutely essential. Same with chest sealing. Something again that's not taught at the standard first aid level, but should be. I would think.
I mean, especially a chest seal. Like if you have a hole in your chest cavity, there's not a whole lot you can really do for it. Chest seals, you just slap that sucker on front and back if it's penetrating all the way through, and like it's so simple because you literally just take the thing and stick it over top of the wound, and it helps solve so many problems and prolong life so easily.
Yes. That's a good one. And there are a few brands.
The $10 it costs to buy one of those things, like the Fox Seals are somewhere in that $10, and it's a 2-pack, so front and back. Like, is your life not worth $10?
I mean, depends on how much of a communist that person is.
Those aren't people, so that doesn't matter.
Moving on to defibrillation.
Let's talk defibrillation now.
Yeah.
Some of the very distinctly moral discussions about whether or not somebody's worth saving.
So-
He has no arms or legs either. Do we bother saving him?
So
Wow.
the heart
But,
has a very organized electrical system that fires all the muscle tissues in a very specific way and with specific timing. Like the
which is
timing
why
belt.
that pump doesn't always work, right?
Well, exactly. So when the heart's electrical system is interrupted, those muscle tissues can stop pumping blood effectively, in some cases lethally. The heart just turns into this quivering bag of, looks like worms running around it. So those two main lethal rhythms are called ventricular fibrillation, VFib, and ventricular tachycardia, VTAC. So the way I describe it to people, picture a lecture hall full of people talking amongst themselves, and the professor wants to start class trying to regain order, i.e. organized activity. So the professor grabs a textbook, slams it down on the front desk, and everyone shuts up just for a second or two. At that point, the prof can take control of the room and resume that organized activity rather than the chaos of a moment prior, right? That disorganized activity, the crowd talking, the defibrillator is the textbook slamming on the desk, and the professor is the normal activity taking over, sort of taking the room back. So most of the AED, automatic external defibrillators, are made to shock only those two shockable rhythms and have incredibly good safety margins built in. When a patient goes into a lethal rhythm, the ability of the heart to get shocked out of that rhythm and back to normal decreases with time. That is to say, the sooner the patient gets shocked, the better. And that's why they put defibrillators more and more commonly in high-risk places, venues like gyms, arenas, public theaters, and quite frankly, a lot of places, just a liability thing. If a dentist's office doesn't want to spend the money on a defibrillator, something happens, they kind of look stupid. So a bystander starting CPR and using a defibrillator as soon as possible has a much greater chance of, quote unquote, restarting the heart than a first responder defib, which is only arriving at the scene, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes after the fact. So most CPR courses teach AED usage just to make them less intimidating for people. Interestingly,
you can't screw it up.
Yeah, they're
the worst you can do is put the
spells.
pads in the wrong place, and it just won't shock.
Yeah.
Like if it can't find the rhythm, it simply won't shock. Like you cannot hurt somebody with it. The worst you're doing is giving them a bit of a chest wax.
And the new ones are, almost idiot proof. It's pictures that clearly show where to stick the things, and they even talk to you now.
They talk. They have it. It'll say push the flashing orange button, and even if you're colorblind, you can't tell that it's orange. There's only one thing flashing.
Yeah.
And they won't even dispense a shock unless there's actually a problem too. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And you genuinely can't screw it up. Please don't be afraid of trying these things. The automated external defibrillator was built for firefighters. If a firefighter can figure it out, any average person can figure it out, even cops.
So just to be clear, Scott or Alan, so if the heart totally stops and there's none of that rhythmy stuff going on, the AED doesn't work, or you can't use it, it won't shock?
If the patient is flatline, so like the ECG you see on the screen on TV where they go from like a nice organized rhythm to just like instantly flatline, that's TV producers. That's not real life. In real life, it goes from an organized rhythm to a disorganized rhythm. And the disorganized rhythm is what we're shocking. We're kind of grabbing the heart by the collar and giving it a big smack across the face to get some sense into it. And then hopefully the organized rhythm will take over again and sort of resume what it's supposed to be doing.
But you're right. If there isn't that shockable rhythm, so if it's anything other than that VTAC or VFib, so whether it's something in the atria or whether if there's no electrical activity at all, then the machine, then using the defibrillator won't help anything.
No,
you need a different intervention.
And if you're putting the defib pads on someone who has been dead for 6 hours, they're going to be asystole. The defibrillator is not going to see a shockable rhythm. They're going to see that flat line. It's not shockable, so the orange flashing button is not going to light up. That's how they're made to work. So
Yeah,
And it
when
doesn't
you
matter
stick
how many
that
times
on
you press that
it
button.
measures. Yeah, it measures the heartbeat and everything, and that's how it decides whether it's going to shock or not. So yeah, if there is nothing going on, it won't know what it is, so it just won't.
Then you're quite literally beating a dead horse at that point.
Yeah.
And
Because you do hear stories sometimes of people saying, well, they just dropped, and the second they hit the ground, they were dead, and there was nothing. So the heart can totally stop that quickly, correct?
So what ends up what will often happen there if somebody were wearing a heart monitor that entire time, you would likely see an arrhythmia of some kind. So whether that's a fibrillation or tachycardia or a bradycardia or something, you would see an arrhythmia of some kind while they were still walking and talking, and then all of a sudden they collapse, and it's just that the heart is no longer able to keep up. So,
oh, I don't feel so good. Thud.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the best thing you can do is just attach one of these things to yourself and carry it around with you every day
at all
you're
times.
fine.
And then
Yeah,
you just like, even if you just have the pads on you and you keep the machine in the backpack, then at least you're advancing that. Please don't actually do that. It's
Those batteries are
I feel the
you
need to say this out loud. Please don't actually do that.
There are actually people with certain heart conditions, and they have an implanted defibrillator, just the way a pacemaker works, that watches.
I was just going to say, I have a family member that has one of those, and it's actually gone off twice.
Yep.
So
it reacts a whole lot faster. It's a great system.
Yep.
Interestingly, they actually have drones flown by paramedics, which can deliver a defibrillator right to a scene, talk two ways through the drone to the caller, and talk them through using that defibrillator as a way of getting defibrillators onto the patient as quickly as possible. There's a proof of concept study done in Sweden, actually, in sort of big urban centers where it's hard to get around, but a drone can just arrive. It's pretty cool.
How much does one of these cost, the ADs?
About $1,500 delivered.
There's usually, like, if you want to put one in the workplace, there's usually some government programs that'll help assist that, and then you get it registered on a map, and then people will know that it's there because there's other places you can look to see where's the closest one, and so on and so forth.
So you can just do that. That's like, there's user generated data for that as well. There's an app called Pulse Point, where it's again user generated data, but you can even just upload a picture of where that defibrillator is and the geotag. And I was just looking at it, and the closest one to me is about 2 blocks away at a community center. But that's another great resource. And even if you're in the building, because I'm the safety nerd that I am, like when one of my kids plays hockey, we have a contest between the two kids who can find the defibrillator in the arena the fastest. Because it's one thing for me to say, for me to be doing CPR on the ice and say, go get me the defibrillator. It's quite another for me to be able to say, go to the concession stand, and it's on the wall next to the concession stand, get the defibrillator and bring it to me. One of those is going to produce a much faster result. So we have a contest every time we go to an arena, who can find the AED the fastest.
And that's just part of situational awareness. They're becoming so common now. There's probably a bunch of fire extinguishers and one or two defibrillators in these buildings. So if you pay attention to those little details, might never need to know, but if you need to know, you need to know really fast.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at defibs here. Question about, they're listed as automatic or semi-automatic. Do you guys know the difference?
So technically what we're calling an automatic is a semi-automatic. So a semi-automatic is one where you have to press the button to deliver the shock. An automatic will deliver the shock as soon as it finds it. So in order to simplify the terminology, an AED and an SAED are, for all practical purposes, the same thing.
One's like probably black and labeled an assault AED.
Yeah,
Well,
it's super
yeah, but like
dangerous and
if you go
prohibited.
like if you go to any big box store, you go to the mall, you go to the local arena or high school or whatever, you see the box on the wall with the big heart and the lightning bolt through it that says AED. What you're actually getting there is a semi-automated defibrillator, because you still have to press the button and make it go. You still have a decision to make to actually press the button and deliver the shock.
So it
Whereas-
advises the shock, but you have to still tell it to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Those are the only practical
Yeah,
differences.
very loudly it tells you to shock
Yeah.
the person and
Yeah.
to stop touching the person.
Yeah. Do not touch the patient.
Yeah.
Deliver shock. Press the flashing shock button. Shock 1 delivered. Continue CPR.
Done voice
what-
work
question
for-
for you.
Yeah, he's actually the one that recorded that audio.
Yeah, I actually. So I may or may not have worked for Zoll at one point.
It's funny because it's the Zoll AEDs I'm looking at right now.
Shocking.
They are very nice ones.
Come on, nobody got that?
Yeah, I
I
got
got
that.
it,
I
just
heard that.
Oh.
Chose to leave that one alone.
It only encourages you if we respond.
I don't need encouraging.
Alan, quick question. What was
Yeah.
that app? What was that app again that you were
Pulse Point.
Pulse Point?
Pulse Point AED. It's
Pulse Point AED, okay.
On my phone, it's kind of a yellow icon with like a yellow heart with the defibrillator, like the thing through it, the lightning bolt through it.
If you are looking at getting one of those things, the pads do need to be replaced every couple of years because like the glue degrades or whatever. There
Yep.
are government programs if you have one to replace them.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just like check with your local EMS provider, whatever
Yeah.
whatever service is doing that, because they're the ones that usually administer, at least in Ontario, they're the ones
Yeah.
that usually administer that program, and they'll either say yes, we've got, yes, you're a candidate for it. They like public spaces more than like private workplaces, but that's just again
What's
it's based on likelihood.
What's the price point on like a portable AED? Say if somebody wanted to get one and just throw it in their vehicle and have it with them,
You can
price
spend
point
probably
on
as little as about $800 and as much as about $3,500, depending on some of the
Yikes.
features you want. I would say $1,500 is like the last few that I sold. And again, full disclaimer, this is part of what I do for a living. The last few that I've sold have been in the $1,500 range.
Yeah.
So what Alan's saying is you have to wait until the shit actually hits the fan, use the app, go get one, and then just scrounge as required.
I
Yeah.
am not saying that at all. That Ian's saying
Yeah.
that, not me.
Yeah, my search and rescue group has several of them, and we usually keep one at our command posts, and then there's usually one in a backpack roaming around the event as well. So they're not even that heavy.
No, they're not.
No, they're pretty tiny. They're
Yeah.
surprisingly small.
The Philips ones in particular are exceptionally small,
Yeah.
and the Zoll ones have a bigger battery and a longer life, and most of them have a guarantee for 5 years, and most
Yeah.
suppliers will provide pads for 5 years. So when you buy it,
Yeah.
so if you've got they might have the pads might have 2 years on them, but you just send them back and get a new one. Or if you use it, they'll actually send you a complete replacement unit. You send them the old one, they'll refurbish it and send it back to you, because they like if it gets used, it needs to be serviced.
They are surprisingly
You can't just recharge the battery.
No.
Well, I guess my turn finally.
Yeah, what you got?
All right, cool. So first of all, I put a link to the news article in the commentary for the YouTube, and basically it didn't have as much pizzazz as the other news articles today, but it's only 2 days old, and it's a global news article from Victoria of all places. Now, this is during normal times without some sort of COVID peak happening or anything else. Man waited on the phone for 10 minutes, couldn't get through to 911, so he just drove himself to the hospital, and it was for something relatively serious. It wasn't life threatening per se, but anyways, what I'm trying to get at is that normal times ambulances are already in short supply and staff and everything else. So obviously the logistical train's already having a problem right now during normal times. Can you imagine what it'd be like in bad times? And that's why I'm kind of glad we actually did this program despite my shit talking you. So actually I got a couple questions right off the bat. So because we've got a worldwide disease going on right now that requires good breathing, and I'm just saying, so for example, you break out your pulse oximeter and you have it hooked up to a guy like this, and all of a sudden you discover that the guy's getting a little low on oxygen. The one thing I was trying to think of that would actually come into play in a situation that we're facing right now is I don't really have a bottle of O2 hanging around to kind of keep the guy from going over the deep end.
Sucks.
Um, Yeah, and because it's an accelerant for one, and of course you have to get it replaced at a welding shop or something like that, or not a welding shop.
Yeah,
No, you
medical
would probably
supply
want
store.
medical oxygen for
tanks
that.
around.
But I'm just saying,
kind of dangerous. Yeah.
I'm just saying, and yeah, so bad idea. So I was actually looking at those like those old people style portable oxygen concentrators that actually aren't like bottled
Absolutely.
oxygen. They just Yep. So I was thinking, could you actually use a portable oxygen concentrator as an alternative to having like a bottle of O2 with 10 liters per
100%.
minute going to the nose?
Over and over. The challenge with those is that they don't produce like life-saving amounts of oxygen. They produce life-enhancing amounts of oxygen.
Okay.
So
Also,
you wouldn't want to
if
be.
you're planning on administering oxygen in any way, maybe go take the class on how to do that, because there's some things that could go wrong.
Yeah, there's definitely some nuance to it, and those concentrators, like, I suppose there's probably a way you could rig that concentrator to refill a bottle for higher flow demand, but it's all about the flow rate, so the number of liters per minute that you're actually flowing oxygen into that person, based on their needs, and so the concentrator has a much lower capacity to deliver oxygen. So it might be able to deliver like 4 to 6 liters a minute, and somebody who's having a breathing emergency might need 15 liters a minute.
Yeah, but at least
And the
it's something that'll
concentrator
take the
just
edge
wouldn't.
off.
It would definitely help take the edge off, but it's more intended for chronic users. So somebody who's got like a COPD or an emphysema where they need oxygen, but they need a little bit of help, not like a life-saving volume.
So the 21% oxygen in room air isn't quite enough for them. They need a little top up just to tilt the scale in their favor a bit. So 24 or 28%, something like that, just to nudge them over. Those concentrators max out about 40% if they're kind of going full tilt.
Cool. And they're electrically driven, right? There's no other parts required, just power.
Just power, and a lot of them have a battery to them. I spent a couple of days when the power went out in 20 some odd years ago, or not quite 20 years ago, in 2003 the power went out. We were out of power for some places for a couple of weeks. A lot of what I did for that time was drive around and recharge batteries with a generator. So those who had chosen to request help, there's now a list that you can get on. If you have home oxygen, you can register with the local ambulance service and say, so that they know where you are, so that in the event that there is a long-term power outage, we can go to you and top up your oxygen, like top up your systems, rather than you having to call and say, I'm now out of oxygen and it's an emergency. We can prevent that by having that. And it's one of those totally voluntary things. It's not a mandatory list, because I know how much we love our names being on lists around here. But
registration leads to confiscation.
Your lungs will not be confiscated. But it speeds up the process of knowing where to go, right? Where the highest priority people are going to be. Because if you can't breathe, nothing else matters. What was it? The Lung Association, that was their tagline for a lot of years.
Asthma, yeah.
Asthma Association, yeah. So and they got it right. Right? If you can't breathe, everybody close your mouth and plug one nostril and take a few deep breaths. It's really uncomfortable after a couple of moments. So if we can prevent that, that's what you can do by having your information readily available, and having backup supplies, because 2 is 1 and 1 is none.
Yeah. So just get some oxygen tanks.
Yeah.
Just keep them away from your home.
And not next to the wood stove or anything.
Yeah,
No,
definitely not next
certainly
to
not.
things that create heat, that generate heat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Don't store it anywhere near anything that's dangerous.
Cool. Next question. Suture courses. I guess it's a 3-part question right off the bat. Assuming there's a doctor somewhere, even if it's 2 days away, I guess you'd be making things worse by doing sutures, but is there a value in taking a suture course, getting sutures, like the actual materials on hand and everything else it is? If so, is there a way to get suture training?
Well, if a wound needs suturing, it needs it kind of in a timely fashion. If it's been more than about 12 hours, it starts healing and it doesn't if the two edges are healing independently as opposed to healing to each other, it's not going to heal as well. You're going to sort of get a big gaping scar there. So the concept is more time sensitive. I can't speak to specific suture courses, but I know YouTube.
I'm not kidding. There's thousands of videos on how to do it. You can order the practice pad on Amazon. I think it's about $17, and I think you can even order suture kits on Amazon.
And quite frankly, a lot of sort of medical professionals practice suturing on like a turkey thigh or bananas, right? Where you sort of have different layers of skin to work through, and you make bananas.
Pig's feet at the grocery store are excellent.
Exactly.
Yep.
But yes, I'm self-taught for suturing. It's one of those things that I want to know how to do so that if I ever need to do it, I can do it. But again, much like a decompression needle, while I know how to use it, I'd rather never have to use that. But if the guy's going to be dead anyways, or I'm going to be dead anyways, and there's no one with a higher level of training around,
let's give it a shot.
Let's give her, yeah. Let's give her.
So for skin wounds, you don't need to suture. The advantage of suturing is that it will minimize the scar, which will also help prevent infection, speed up healing. You can anything that will hold the edges of that wound together. So things like butterfly dressings or steri strips will do the same job of holding, like it'll hold the skin together, and then you can cover it up, keep it from getting infected.
Super glue for really small things. There's
super glue for small stuff.
New like zip tie ones where you stick it on one side and the other and pull it, and it just sort of snugs it all up.
Yeah,
those things are really cool too. But next time you're in the area, Ian, I will gladly teach you how to suture. It's actually very simple.
Actually, I'm deadly curious about that for sure.
You can get super complicated and do like the whole running thing, but honestly, if you know like the most basic single stitch, that's all you need to know.
Cool.
We'll get Carmen on to teach us.
Alternatively, I was going to try and trigger Alan again by mentioning the veterinary stapler, but I didn't want to.
No, as long as you're not trying to use it on your face, you're fine. I have no objection to the veterinary stapler. Just it's a little bit more painful. That's all.
Yeah, and actually removing them, I think, would be a bit of a pain in the ass. But
yes, well, or
having had many medical staples removed from my back and or shoulder, I can tell you it is not fun.
Right.
Yeah, I would rather use sutures than staples, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, a suture kit can be super simple. Like all you really need is I'm looking at mine right here. A curved set of forceps, like the locking ones, so that you can clip your needle to it and stick that through the skin. And then a pair of tweezers, because you're actually going to use those tweezers to pinch the edges of the wound and turn them up and out so you can just stick the thing right through it. And then obviously the sutures themselves, and then a pair of scissors. That's it.
Yep. It's
there's
not
different types of materials. Yeah.
I think the worst, the thing that sucks the most about that, right? Is when you go to the hospital and it's a doctor that tries to do it, because that really should be a nursing task, but doctors try to get involved in it, and that's when things start to go awry.
Yeah. There's any recommendations on places to get a good high quality suture kit? I mean,
check with your local dental supply.
Yeah.
Dental supply.
Any medical supply place will have them. I mean, the problem is like unless it's been through an autoclave and sealed, it's not going to be sterile. So it really doesn't matter at that point. Like the sutures are going to come packaged and sterile, but like if your tools aren't packaged in that stuff, they're not going to be sterile. So really doesn't matter. Like
there's a kit on Amazon for $40.
Yeah, I mean that's where I got all of mine. It's off of Amazon because
there's a kit for $30, and there's practice kits.
Yeah.
And
the reality is that like it sits in this little thing which isn't sealed, so it's not sterile. So I don't care if it's high quality or low quality, because as long as the sutures themselves are good, that's the important part. The rest of it's just allowing you to hold on to the stuff and push it through the skin.
And you can even get those locking forceps You get those at your local Bass Pro.
Hemostats or whatever they call them. Yeah.
They're generally they used to be called Kelly forceps, but
It's different names. But yeah, I just have I like the little ones. The really long ones are not good for me because sausage fingers, and I like the little ones. I'm more.
But you can even get those at Bass Pro or your local, or even Canadian Tire sells those.
Or almost any flea market in the world has that.
Absolutely.
That weird medical
fly tires
place.
use them absolutely.
Yeah.
So those exist everywhere. Just make sure that they're sterilized before they come into skin contact.
Yeah, that's fair. So can I channel my Rambo 3 moment and talk about cauterization for a second?
Only if you're gonna pour gunpowder in it and light.
Well, I'm gonna pour gunpowder in it and light it off and make sure you don't have this cauterization. Actually, my real question is cauterization still a thing, or do they just say that's just dumb? Let's just.
I had both my nostrils cauterized when I was a kid. Now that's going back almost 30 years. We've kind of replaced cauterization with hemostatic dressings like Quick Claw, or Celox, or
don't use the powder.
Don't use the powder, but the gauze. It does a lot of the same thing.
Pre-impregnated gauze, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The really good stuff has a little thin metal wire running through it, so when you go into the hospital and they X-ray you, if they forgot it inside, they'll see it and pull it out. Yeah, absolutely. Do I guess if a guy's gonna die and you only have the powder, then use the powder. But if you're going to be buying something, don't buy the powder. It ends up blowing everywhere. It gets into places that it shouldn't, which is not good for you.
Question I had actually from my family: EpiPens. So you're more than 50 kilometers away, more than a couple days away. Allergic reaction happens. Use your EpiPen. That's only good for about 10 minutes. Is there a problem with using more than one?
No,
nope,
not at all.
Nope. You can kind of use it sequentially.
That's part of the training is again, 2 is 1, 1 is none. Use the next one 10 minutes later. But the idea is that it buys time for the antihistamines to kick in. So you're taking that and you're using the EpiPen, and then if you're not going straight to the hospital, you're taking Benadryl to go with it.
Mm-hmm. And they were talking about Benadryl versus Allegra, just taking Allegra pill, because I think Benadryl had some side effects now as well. They're talking about.
There's side effects to everything.
Yeah, fair enough.
It just makes you sleepy.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Cool.
I would go for something non-drowsy so that I can better assess your level of responsiveness.
So back to the idea of tourniquets and stuff like that. So a guy's bleeding out. So say he's a little bit low on fluids. At what point in your first aid training does IV replacement fluids come in, like saline or anything else you have access to?
That's kind of a challenging one. There's a couple of schools of thought. If you're pouring in saline, you're just diluting the clotting factors that are there. You're diluting the the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood that's there. So you're kind of artificially increasing the blood pressure, but it's not necessarily helping the patient.
You're also lowering their body temperature.
Yeah, you're putting cold water into them, which doesn't necessarily help.
So the H in the March assessment is hypothermia.
Yeah. So if your first aid kit doesn't have those hand warmer things and a reflective blanket, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. So the short answer is no. If they're losing a lot of blood, they need to stay hydrated, but you need to stop the bleeding first. And they need to rehydrate naturally and produce fresh blood on their own. So we build new blood all the damn time, right? I go and donate blood. I lose a pint and I've got it built back within an hour because I've replaced my electrolytes and I'm drinking lots of water.
Yeah. Just if you don't, jerky and a couple of bottles of water on you and go, here you go.
Pretty much. Yep.
Cool. Back to the Narcan usage. I think we covered it briefly on the last first aid episode, but I guess kind of want to go a little bit of a deep dive on this one. Simply the fact is that nobody really talks about what does Narcan actually counteract? Is it just fentanyl? Is it just meth? Is it carfentanil? Is it all the above?
So not meth. Okay. So anything that's opiate based. So opium based. Right. That's your morphine and lower grades, which includes fentanyl. So when you have a prescription for it, it's called morphine. When you don't, it's called heroin.
Yeah.
And when it's super concentrated, it's called fentanyl.
So opioids aren't inherently toxic. They just relax you so much you forget to breathe. Yeah. So what Narcan or naloxone does is it acts to reverse that overdose by blocking the opioid receptor in the body. That way, then your body goes, oh yeah, breathe. They have kits available, most pharmacies, just to deal with this public health crisis, right? It gets fired in the nostril just the way Dristan or Otrivin does. It's absorbed by the blood vessels. You have very vascular. Anyone who's had a nosebleed knows how vascular your nose is. And basically, it acts, it's a little umbrella. It covers that receptor. So anything that acts on the opioid receptor is considered an opioid. The morphine, the fentanyl, heroin, carfentanil, sort of all these derivatives, they're opioids because they act on the opioid receptor. So Narcan acts on the opioid receptor. Different things have different antidotes. You know, if you have an organophosphate poisoning, it deals, you know, it's a different poison, different antidote.
Yeah. So if you look at it, so when they take the drug, just picture like a stoop somewhere and there's a bunch of people milling about. That's the drug. And then you take the Narcan and then somebody coming out and shooing those people away for a little while. Eventually they come back. So it's not like you take it and then you're just like instantly sober and fine. It lasts for a little while and then the drug kind of starts working again and you'll start overdosing all over again.
Sounds like a party.
Or your body has processed it to a point where you're high instead of overdosed.
Yes.
Sorry. The term we've been instructed to use now is overused.
It doesn't neutralize the drug so that it's gone. It just kind of gets them over the hump again, like most things, to prolong that window where somebody that has like the whole breathing thing and everything can come and give them the care that they need.
So it's kind of like an EpiPen.
Yeah.
Yeah, same concept.
And if you ever have to give it to somebody, give it to them and then get
Step
the heck
back.
out of the way.
Yeah.
Stay at a punching range.
Yeah, because you've just ruined their high.
And they probably had to work really hard to get that stuff.
Yeah. And yeah, like the newer way is the nasal spray. You can still get the injectable one. I kind of like the injectable one personally.
I have the nasal spray
nose
from the
thing.
pharmacy.
The nasal spray is easier. You can stick it up their nose and squeeze it. I'm just kind of the whole, if they're really not breathing all that well, how well is it going to circulate and everything up the nose?
Well, that's where a good
thought,
sternal rub will help, and they will, because you definitely have to stimulate their breathing, but it's also absorbed.
Yeah,
the intranasal absorption is through the bloodstream, not through a breath. So
yeah,
your nose is very vascular because it has to heat up cold air that you're breathing in so that your lungs don't get frostbite.
Yeah, which is why people snort drugs. Yeah. Which ends up, it's the cause and solution.
It's the cause and solution to all of life's problems.
Yeah.
Snorting things.
Yeah. But
it's.
I kind of just like the other one because I can kind of just stick it in and just get the heck out of the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it comes in 2 flavors. Important thing is just get the heck out of the way.
And
Yeah, I wish they actually had them more often around here. There's absolutely none in BC. I know you guys have them at pretty much every drugguy there. There's just none available out here. Surprise, surprise, I guess. But anyway,
do you need me to mail you some? Yeah,
at this
I can
point,
just go get some at Shoppers.
Yeah, it seems that way. That's for sure. Okay, so after 12 hours, you guys said that the sutures, you need to have the skin back together before it starts healing and stuff. What about setting bones? Long-term emergency, you're days away from help. Break a bone.
Set it and forget it. So you're gonna put it in neutral position. You probably have to apply some traction to it.
Yeah.
To align the ends. Now I'm going. Please don't actually do this unless you don't have another choice. But essentially, the way you would do that is you get your splint set up. You would duct tape it to the proximal, so the closer to the body side of the break. So if we're talking like a forearm, for example, or a wrist, You would go up like towards the elbow, and you would duct tape it in place so it can't move anywhere. And then you would apply some traction to that to put it into the place where it needs to be. And then you would duct tape it at the distal end, so on the injured end. And the idea is that it's going to create that separation and not let the ends of the bone rub together, because you don't want that. That's where it's going to chip and do really nasty damage.
And this is where having some opiates on hand would probably
Yeah, this is you definitely want to you definitely want this to be done under a fair bit of sedation. So Josh is asking in the chat, are we considering traction? I'm talking about creating traction essentially.
Yeah.
So you're gonna hold one spot in place. You're gonna create some traction and then hold it in place along a splint that will allow that traction to stay in place. And then you're stuck in that position for several weeks. So in a clinical setting, it's gonna get set in place. You're gonna get the pins and screws and plates and whatever to hold it still, and then you'd still be in a cast for 2 months. In this case, it'd probably take a whole lot longer because you don't have the things to hold the bone in place. This is an imperfect solution. Really, really, really important if you're going to do this before and after you do the any movement or any stabilization or immobilization of the bone. Check the distal pulse. So that's the pulse right at your fingertips or at your toes. Make sure that you have good circulation there before and after.
Yeah.
Because if you move something and you cut off circulation, then you're no longer getting oxygenated blood to the extremity, and bad things are going on.
Which is also a great way to check and make sure that your tourniquet is working.
Yes.
So if you had to improvise and use something that is less than ideal, check and see what the pulse is doing below that. If you can still feel it and feel it strongly, maybe you need to figure something else out.
Yeah.
If you feel it and it's weak, that could be also a bad sign. But just crank that thing on there. But yeah, knowing how to feel a pulse, especially below an area, is good.
Yeah, and you can do the nail bed test, right? So everybody can do this to yourselves, right? If you push down on your fingernail, it kind of turns white, and then when you let it go, it'll go back to its normal color within a couple of seconds. If it doesn't return back to its normal color, or if the fingernails are starting to look blue, that's a sign of reduced or missing circulation.
Yeah.
Cool. One of the guys from the Discord group mentioned he wanted to talk about potential use, or maybe, I guess, case use for a catheter in the first aid kit.
So the way I read that question was, so a catheter is a pretty broad term, but technically speaking, again, the way I kind of read that question was like a catheter is what's left after you start an IV and you pull out the sharp.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. We call it an IV catheter. It's not the urinary catheter. Catheter just kind of means a tube.
Yeah. So it just means a tube that goes inside the body. And there's the way I read that question was specifically relating to IV fluids, and we've kind of covered that already. Beyond that, roll over and pee. There's we're not putting in a Foley isn't something that I would ever think is a useful skill in the field.
Fair enough. Cool.
Well, I mean, I guess you could just pinch it off, right? And then it leave no trace, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Bring it into a bottle somewhere.
Okay.
So if you're doing some weird clandestine op where you can't leave anything, you could just, do that. But...
All right.
I suppose.
Last question I had.
Cues.
So everybody's been talking about tourniquets because everybody likes to talk about the tactical stuff and everything else. But what's the most overlooked medical preps that people should have on hand but don't, like crutches or that type of thing?
A little pen with a pupil gauge, like a pen light.
Yep.
And normally, as one of the tactical guys, all of the lumens is what you want. You don't want that with one of these. If it's too bright, it's not going to work very good for you. And a notepad.
Yeah,
paper.
And I would say the notepad is probably the most important thing. So being able to monitor a person's progression, monitor their vital signs as they go,
Right in the Rain makes a great EMS one that's got all of the things there. So like when you're under stress, you're going to forget a bunch of stuff. It prompts you by having the things saying, oh, what's the pulse? What's the oxygen saturation? What's the you can write those things down, which also like if the pulse oximeter is kind of a handy thing so that you don't have to sit there and like count their pulse. It'll tell you what that is because like you kind of want to know what the oxygen saturation, especially if you're going to be giving them O2.
That's why I bought a smartwatch.
Yeah.
Which is, they're maybe accurate within 10% most of the time.
Yeah.
But the idea, specifically being able to monitor whether somebody's progressing, right? They're getting better, or regressing, they're getting worse based on what you're doing. Because if they're getting worse, then obviously what you're doing isn't working. You need to change your plan. But if they're getting better, then just keep it up. And the only way to know that is to monitor vital signs and signs and symptoms at set intervals. So in a short-term emergency, right, where maybe an hour waiting for an ambulance, if somebody's reasonably stable, you might do 2 or 3 sets of vitals. If we're talking about a long-term, right, where maybe 2 or 3 days, we're waiting for extraction, we're in the middle of Baffin Island and it's going to take some time to get out, you might be doing vitals every hour instead. And that timeline is really dependent on what that person's condition is. So if they're saying that they're breathing okay, then that's great. I probably don't have to worry about that. But if they're saying that their breathing is a little bit labored, their oxygen saturation is right now it's at 95, but then in 15 minutes it's at 93, and then in an hour it's at like 90, then we can see that they're regressing, things are getting worse, and we need to intervene with that a little more actively. But without that information, you're just guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you're going out in a group somewhere with a bunch of people, having some way to identify, because like mass casualty events is the thing that happens, and that's probably like definitely in the advanced medical care thing is handling more than one person at a time. Some way to identify. So I have a card that I keep in my first aid kit, and in my trauma kit I've got several. And then you can prioritize visually. It's nice and easy. This is one of the military ones, so it's got a nice big 1 in red, so like this is a priority 1. This guy needs to get seen immediately, and then the 2 and a 3 or whatever. You got to have some way of doing that with you and your group that everybody recognizes, and you need to know what your resources are, because at some point you're going to need to make a not an emotional decision,
Logical one.
and you've only got X number of resources and you've got X number of casualties with these different things. How do I allocate those resources in the way that saves the most number of people? Do I allocate them all to one guy that's close to death and and nobody else gets anything? Or do I save these 3 people that have a better chance? So
that just depends. If I'm the guy that's really hurt, then all resources go to me, obviously.
Well, and honestly, that can make a big, like, if you're the medic,
then that changes your decision. Like just like if it's the guy that has the truck keys in his pocket, you probably want to make sure that he's the one that doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
Shades of 1 second after though with the triaging.
Yeah. No, but it's that's like that could be an episode unto itself, right?
I mean,
multiple casualty incidents and triage.
The triage tabletop exercises are
like that's a full weekend.
They're very fun because you come up with ridiculous scenarios, but they're so complex and nobody's got the same answer, right? Like you'll go through and you go, well, this and this and this and this and this, and like everyone's just a little, like the ones that are obviously, this guy's fine, or this guy's just like are easy. It's the ones in the middle, right? Those are the hard ones where it's like where does this person sit on this spectrum of casualties?
Which is a great time. It's a lot of fun to do. Definitely outside the scope of a podcast that we're now an hour and 35 minutes into.
But it's definitely, I think, something you need to consider when you're talking about advanced medical care, because
Absolutely.
It's probably the hardest part of all of this is deciding who gets care and who doesn't.
For now.
Yeah.
Time for podcast challenge.
Sure.
I think so.
Jeff.
Sure. So, and this would apply to me for sure. I just have my basic, absolute low-level first aid CPR. So, step up your first aid knowledge, at least one level, or take a refresher course.
And if you'd like information on that, find me on the podcast, either the Discord group or send me an email. I can hook you up with some links.
I have a deal of the week. Thanks to Better Andrew again for the Discord for the tip. Once again, Princess Auto, our go-to for prepper supplies, it seems, has Clean Flow fuel stabilizer, like stable, same idea, at $3.99 for a bottle. It's almost half price.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
And if you happen to be on the Discord, he plopped a little video as well with that, where somebody did a test on fuel stabilizer with ethanol, and it's worth a look at.
Cool.
Gonna have to check that out.
You'd be surprised, actually.
Cool. Let's get into some shout outs. So I got a quick shout out mentioning the Discord. Just a quick shout out to everybody who's joined and is actively sharing information. So the Discord's been out for about a week now, and we're up to 60 members, and there's been all kinds of good chat in there, and all kinds of good information. I even threw a quick getaway in there giveaway to test out, and giving out a couple of 18-in-1 little multi-tool wallet card things. So a couple winners of those I got to mail out. But
I have one of those. It's fantastic.
Mhm.
You're
So
lucky
thanks.
if you won one.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining and sharing all your information, because it's been fantastic to watch this grow in such a rapid succession in just a week. So
Yeah, it's been a really good
Appreciate
back and
everybody.
forth with a lot of the guys. They've been really chatty, which is good. I got a shout out for the Island Mentor for the extra set of hands with logistics. He's been very helpful lately, and actually gave me a huge hand when I was actually away from the house for a week. So thank you very much.
So that's where you were. That's why you couldn't be bothered to show up for the show. Gotcha.
Well, that and other reasons, but anyway.
And I'll throw a shout out to my friend Rob for his help and guidance with my plumbing issue. Yeah, things worked out well, and I'm happy. So
awesome.
As long as you're happy, Jeff. That's what really counts in my life.
yeah, whatever.
Still not a ham
Blah, blah,
operator
blah.
though.
You don't actually need a license to use one. Just use one legally.
Just saying. In
The
theory.
the license only matters if you get caught.
Do we
Yeah.
want to get kicked off Facebook tonight or not?
I'm just saying, nothing is stopping you from operating one.
Except the law.
Yeah.
Well, operate
That
the
is
Faraday
true.
cage, and it'll never go
Yeah,
anywhere.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, then it's
Or,
totally
or
legal.
during an emergency, which is also
Exactly.
authorized.
Yeah.
And we're in a state of
Aren't we
emergency
in a
right
state
now.
of emergency right now?
Oh, this is terrible advice. Don't listen to us. Just don't.
That's an interesting point. We'll have to discuss this off air.
Yeah, I think we will. Yes, but again, terrible advice. Don't transmit unless you're licensed. Yeah, terrible.
Just listen.
Moving
Like it's
on.
government,
Just
yeah.
listen. Moving on. Email and iTunes reviews. So Darren G got some lids as a part of the podcast challenge for canning. So
Awesome.
Right on.
very nice. They weren't easy to track down for a while there. So glad you were able to find some.
Well done.
And
Alright,
we'd love to see the final results. Drop it in the Discord. Send us an email with it. Love to see what you can.
John sent us multiple emails. The first one this week was says, "Have y'all reviewed the Canadian issued MRE, which either called IMPs, aren't they, or something like that here?
Yeah.
It definitely is prepper applications, but it appears to have the best MRE spoon in the world.
It does.
I
Can confirm.
have I eaten them? Yes. Have we reviewed them? No.
Would you
So-
want to?
No. So MREs are. I mean, MREs are good good when you need a lot of calories really quickly and you don't care what it tastes like, nor do you care about the specific nutritional value. Over more than about 2 or 3 days, most people that I know can't stomach them for any longer than that. It's not healthy food. Don't plan on that. It'll bridge a gap. That's about that.
The Canadian ones do have a really good spoon, and some of them are interesting, like the poutine. My favorite thing about the Canadian ones is that it comes in, like, the American ones are all like plastic bag and like sealed from the element. The Canadian one comes in like a brown paper bag, like your mom packed you a lunch, and that's my favorite part about the whole thing. And like anytime I've shown them to my American friends, it's just like, yeah, it's just like cube that sits there. So they pack a lot better than the American ones. But yeah, it looks like your mom just packed you a sack lunch. It's like, here you go, honey. Have fun going off.
Here you go, sweetheart. Yeah.
And they're really pricey too. I mean, that's the other problem.
Oh
yeah. Well, some of the Canadian ones though are really good.
Yeah.
Also from John, another email. What is the maple seed events that we often mention? From context, they appear to be a shooting competition, but we've never actually explained it. I forget which episode it is, but we've gone into a little bit of detail about this before. It's a marksmanship course. It's not really a competition per se, but
it's an individual one because you can achieve your maple seed patch.
Yeah, which is it's a certificate of recognition or a certificate of competency that who didn't mute their phone? It's a certificate of competency essentially that
$10 penalty
gives you. Yeah, you have to turn your t-shirt in. It gives you an opportunity to shoot under the guidance of somebody who is more experienced. Somebody who can follow a program to get you to shooting safely and accurately. And it's an opportunity to go out and meet other people who are also doing the same thing.
With a little bit of time pressure, and it's based originally upon the American version, which was called the Appleseed, of course. Program.
Yeah, it's a day-long program compared to the U.S. one that's 2 days because they throw in a lot of like mythical stories about Johnny Appleseed, hence the name. But it's great for learning the fundamentals of marksmanship. Yeah, a little outdated some of the stuff, but the fundamentals are there and super important if you are into target shooting of any kind. So highly recommend.
Cool. All right. Also got one. The last one from John. He actually just sent a link to a Reddit article showing a Tiger tank in World War II being used for training purposes, powered by a wood gasifier. So I figured Scott would like that.
Heart emoji.
Not pictured in that is the CO detector that was inside.
Yeah.
So. 1 hour, 42 minutes, and 9 seconds.
I was going for as far in as I possibly could.
That is a new record.
But what's powering that?
The gasifier.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Clearly,
it's a perpetual.
It's the cause and solution.
Yeah, it's the cause and solution. This seems to be our theme for the evening.
So we do have a long one from another listener, but we'll get to that one next week because it's a pretty long article.
Yeah, it's a good long email. It's going to take some time to dissect, so we will we'll hopefully get that one next week.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. But with that, and finally mentioning carbon monoxide, I'll bring episode 134 of the Canadian Prepper podcast to an end. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, or of course your favorite podcast app. Please help us out, submit a review. It does help other people find us.
And we do record these shows for now live on Facebook and YouTube. If you want an early peek at the shows, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Canadian Prepper Podcast, and click the notifications tab. That will give you an alert when we're going live. If you want to get at me directly, you can find me either in the Discord chat as Safety Nerd or Alan at prepperpodcast.ca, and that's Alan with one L.
Gavin, where can everybody get you?
The best place to find me is, for now, on the Instagram, UrbexGTA, or you can find me, Ragnarok Tactical. If you need some medical supplies when you're not buying stuff from Rapid Survival, hit up Ragnarok Tactical. Use the code GAVIN10 for a discount.
Cool.
And you can find me just at feedback at prepperpodcast.ca.
And I may or may not forward it. If it's hate mail about you not getting your ham license, then it's coming your way for sure. Anything else, I'll decide as things come.
Yeah, I would I would expect nothing less.
For compliments, you can get me, Scott, at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. If you have complaints, it's Alan with one L at prepperpodcast.ca.
Don't worry, I'll still publicly shame you. Don't worry, Scott.
Oh, you guys are good. Anybody wants to reach me? I'm at monkman038@gmail.com.
Right on. You can reach Ian directly by emailing me at theislandretreat@gmail.com or on the Discord group under the Island Retreat. You can also find myself and Gavin on Canadian Patriot Podcast on iTunes and YouTube, and the Discord group, Canadian Patriot Podcast. Email us if you want an invite. There you can find us discussing on Sunday evenings or Monday evenings. 9 p.m.
Monday evening. Yes.
Monday evenings,
Mondays.
9 p.m. Eastern. Why Government Waste and Society has me practicing my gunpowder cauterization.
Oh boy. Please check out Rapid Survival at rapidsurvival.com. You can get me there on the live chat, or you can get me in the Discord chat as well. Been lurking around.
You can
there
try the
quite a bit.
code Gavin10 on that. It may or may not work.
Yeah.
I'll program it in. Now it works.
Sweet.
There you go. Easy as that. So thanks for joining us this evening. Until next time, be prepared, stay safe.
And skip the Narcan this time. Couldn't think of anything funnier. Sorry.
Oh, boy.